believe it or not, this is actually the last coding assignment of the semester. After this, we'll have a handful of discussions of things that you might find interesting, and I'll walk you through them, but the assignments are over after this, and all you have left is the last project. So reminder, that's 20% of your grade. Please do not fall asleep on that. That's a big deal. This focuses on, we're going to end up building what's called a bump chart. You have almost certainly seen these before. You may not have known that they were called a bump chart. The bump chart shows how things like places in a tournament evolved over time. So if you're a soccer fan, you've almost certainly seen bump charts showing how teams fared over the course of a season in like the Premier League or Serie A or something like that. So each spot on the line moving left to right is a position, and the dot is where that team is, what place they're in during that week. It works really, really well when you have a finite number of teams that you can look at and kind of show their run to the championship or something like that. So that's what a bump chart is. The other thing we're going to talk about is that not everything is installable the same way that you've been installing everything all semester long. What we're using to install, when you do install packages, that's going to a worldwide network of computers called CRAN, which is the, I'm going to forget the exact acronym, but it's like the Comprehensive R Package Network, something like that. Anyway, it's where all of our developers send their stuff so that it can be distributed. But once it's in CRAN, it's got to be at sort of a ready for prime time level. Like, it's going to work with a large number of installations. It's going to work with a large number of computers. You've tested it very successfully against Windows and against Mac and against Linux and against all kinds of different versions of those things. And you know it's in pretty good shape. Not all libraries are that way. Some of them are not ready for prime time. So that's the first thing we're going to look at is installing experimental libraries from GitHub, which is a kind of a social coding website, we'll call it. It's a repository for open source code that a lot of developers use when they want other people to have input with it. The first thing you'll need to do is you'll need to install packages, DevTools. DevTools gives you a set of tools that allow you to install some things that help developers, but one of the most important is that you can run this in your command line after that, in the console after that, where it uses the DevTools library and uses a function called install GitHub. And this will install this guy, David S. Joberg's ggBump library, which is not quite ready for CRAN, but is in pretty good shape and actually works pretty well. So we're going to produce a chart that shows what the college football playoff rankings looked like from when they started doing the, here's what the playoff rankings are this week all the way through to the end. So we'll create a bump chart with that. So we're going to load the tidyverse, and we're going to load ggBump. And then I went out to the College Football Playoff Rankings website and scraped this out for you so you can download a data set that has the rankings in them. And we'll go ahead and take a look at that because it's important to look at what they are. So, I just realized that the record is not coming in quite correctly. It's thinking it's a date. Well, that's funny. Yeah, not a big deal. What we're really looking at is the rank, the team, what week it is in the college football season, and I created a separate short team name over here, which will come into play a little bit later. You'll see why that's important in a second. So what this says is in week 13, Baylor was the 9th ranked team in the college football playoffs ranking. In week 14, they were 7th, and in week 15, they remained 7th. Clemson started out in 5th in week 10 and got as high as 3rd by the end of it. By the time they went into the playoffs, you say LSU bounced between 1st and 2nd throughout it. Same with Ohio State, so on and so forth. So in other words, one team, 1 week. Every team has multiple weeks that they were in the top 10. There are a handful that were only in there a couple of weeks. Say Minnesota. Didn't last very long. few other schools that just sort of bounced in and out, like Wisconsin also, really only just in there the 14th and 15th week. That's what the data has to look like. If you have a bump chart, you have one team, 1 week's worth of data, and what rank they were in that week. And then however many weeks you have and however many teams you have, that's how many rows you would have. So we can ignore the record. It's not that important for us now. I'd probably want to go back and fix it. So the form of this is actually really, really simple. It's very, very similar to everything that we've done before using ggplot. It's a new geom bump. The data is rankings. My aesthetic is the week is the X. So similar to line charts that we've done before, the X is pretty much always a date or the week of the season or something like that. Y is the rank, and I'm going to change the color of each line to the team. And just out of the box, this is what we get, which kind of looks vaguely subway mappy, but you can pretty quickly get an idea that these two teams down here are LSU and Ohio State at the bottom. So Ohio State is this green color, LSU is this brown color, and they just sort of move back and forth between who is first and who is second. And in the final rankings, LSU was first, Ohio State was second. I don't want to spoil the end of last year's college football season, but LSU kind of did pretty well, not to give it away. So first things first, I'm kind of annoyed that LSU and Ohio State are here at the bottom when I'm used to number one being at the top. I also don't like this ranking 2.5 and 7.5, and we'll deal with that. And, there's the OCD part of me that's like, none of these schools are these colors. Like Georgia is a bluish color. No. That's got to change. Well, I learned actually something from ggBump, and that there's a really handy little thing that will reverse your Y scale for you. It's scale Y reverse. So if we just run that, and tack it onto the bottom, that flips everything around. So my y-axis is now reversed, and LSU and Ohio State are here at the top. Here's Clemson shooting up to third and staying there, at least till the final. You know how it went. And here is, who was it that snuck in the back door of the play? I don't even remember. And that's kind of the problem, is I can't even really tell these apart. Who's who on here? Purple. Oklahoma, I guess. So we can start to play around with this and make this a little bit more clear. The great part about ggBump is that it's super simple to get out of the box, but we can do a lot better with this. So let's go ahead and add a geom point for each one of these. The aesthetic is exactly the same. The only thing I'm going to add here is a size equals 4 to give me a size on the dots. Now I have a little bit more of an anchor to hold on to where each team was each week. Dot may be a little bit too big for my taste right now, but we're getting better. And notice how my legend has changed to reflect that. So we're getting a little bit, we're taking even a step toward the subway map concept that kind of works, and I kind of like it. So we can fix the color issue by using Scale Color Manual. Several of you have reached out to me and asked how to do this. Well, this is how to do it. We can make the values whatever we want them to be, so long as we have the same number of values as we have items over here. And looking at this is the order that they come in. So this first color is Baylor, and I actually went through and used Google. It took me about 10 minutes to do. Went through and Googled each one of their colors. So this is the green of Baylor. Second is Clemson, so this is some hideous ass orange color. LSU, this would be some kind of purple color. Ohio State, a hateful red color, so on and so forth. So if I run this, you'll see every one of these teams has their nasty, gross-ass colors attached to it. You can walk through here and take a look. But now it becomes fairly clear that this is Oklahoma, and you can see Oklahoma just sort of rising up into here. So that actually worked out pretty well for them. We can keep going. We can keep fixing things. One nice little trick that you can use is, let's say I wanted to add who the teams are on this side and who the teams are on this side, who comes in and who comes out. I can use geom text, and I can use this HJust, which is the horizontal justification. So if I set my filter to the minimum week and the maximum week on here, I can just filter this right in the data, which I didn't even know you could do, to be honest. But I also wouldn't recommend doing this necessarily, because this can get pretty hairy pretty quickly. But what this does is filter rankings by the minimum week and the maximum week, and uses HJust to decide where on here it's going to get displayed. And this is what it ends up looking like. So it ends up sticking a label on the end of the line here on each one, and you have a better idea of who is where and what's going on. So here's Utah rising up and then disappearing. I think they got thumped. We can also get rid of the legend by adding legend position equals none into a theme. So this right here will take care of it. I'm going to slap theme minimal on here to drop out the default gray. I'm going to get rid of the legend, and I'm also going to drop some tick lines that are not really that necessary. And we get a little bit better. So now it's a little cleaner. My legend is gone. I can see a little bit more of these labels. They're not quite right yet. Now my axis values are a little messed up. I'm not liking that too much. But first we can fix our text hierarchy, so we add a little bit more to the theme to fix the headline and the chatter and things like that. Now we can go ahead and get these labels to pop in just a little bit better. We can do that by changing the figure width. So up here in this R block all along, you've been able to add extra things to change the size of the chart. So we can add fig.width equals 8. The default is 7 by 7. So this is going to change the width of the chart to 8. And then down here, I'm going to actually change the breaks of my X value. So instead of just 10, 12, and 14, I get all of them. So I'm just labeling each line down there, each one of the weeks, and I can do the same in my scale Y reverse. I can add that breaks, and I can actually label all of the rankings 1 through 10, which looks better certainly than 2.5 and 7.5, because that's not really a rank. And when I run all of that together, I get this. I get a subway map of the college football playoff rankings. There's a few teams that sort of disappear out of there. There's some things that don't quite work right. There's some teams that come in here in the middle and disappear. This is Minnesota right here. Wisconsin shows up just at the end. There's some other things that I'd want to do with this, but this is what I was talking about earlier, where it works better if you have a confined number of teams. If we were looking at the Premier League in England, we would have just 20 teams in this, and we could show all 20 and where they were. Any one of the major professional soccer leagues in Europe has a finite number of teams. College football has 132 that could possibly come in here. So that's why you're going to get a little bit of nuttiness in here. I'd probably go in here with Illustrator and probably take a few things out and fix a few things, like Florida drops out of the top 10 for a little while in here, but the line keeps going. I'd probably delete this line between here and here when they pop back in at 9. There's just a bunch of different stuff that I would probably do. Baylor appears here for the first time. I might only include schools that were in the top 10 to begin with and go from there. But that's a matter of personal preference, just showing you a few things that are flawed with it. But it does pretty clearly show you that LSU and Ohio State just sort of were in there from the beginning. Or maybe you just want to look at who was ever actually in the playoff race. So Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma, maybe only those teams, Clemson, obviously, that were only ever in the top 5. Maybe you only include those. It's up to you. You've got options available to you, but that's how you make a bump chart, and that's how you use a library that's not in CRAN and doesn't just install the way that everything else does. So check out the assignment, and good luck.